Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Leader Series AI Agents. I am your host, Anmol Malhotra, and I have my co host, friend, and colleague, Karan Gupta, with me.
Hello everyone, Karan this side. Today it's another good episode, which is a continuation of what we spoke about in the previous one, which is Model Context Protocols, MCP. Today we'll dive a little bit into a use case to show you how MCP works in action.
Before we dive into that, why don't you give everyone like 20 seconds of what MCP was so that everyone's up to speed? And then I'm equally, if not more, excited to dive into a real example with you.
Perfect, Anmol. So just to give our viewers a 30-second skinny of what MCP is, for more details, I would love for you to check out our previous video where we have spent some good time explaining why MCP is important and what does MCP really do, right? But today, let's talk quickly about it. MCP is a protocol which makes the communication between an AI application and an AI agent in a standard manner, right? Think of it like a USB protocol for agents. And it has three key components. It has a host, which is a collection of different clients. Think of it as a host of applications for, let's say, a real estate use case, right? So that's the host. You have multiple clients, which are actual AI applications. Think of chatbots or conversational UI or agentic ecosystem, etc. All of those are different clients that can use agentic capabilities to talk to the end user, right? That is the second part. And the third part is MCP servers, which is another name for the agent itself, right? You could have multiple MCP servers slash agents that can talk to different data sources. It could be local data source. It could be data sources which are publicly available via API endpoints.
Perfect, Karan. Love that recall. With that in mind, let's ground ourselves in a real business example, something which a lot of our viewers can relate to. And for this, the example we have in mind is of a real estate AI agent. And as everyone can see, my apartment's slowly coming along. So this was the inspiration for this. I would love to know, Karan, if we are building like a real estate AI agent, which I can just question, like if I have a 2 BHK apartment in Seattle downtown, how does it compare in terms of its rent, square footage, amenities to all the other apartments around when I'm like buying or renting it? So I'm imagining it in my head. There's like a listing service, there's Zillow, Redfin, and all sorts of apps where you can get data from. And then there's like the local property dealer or the real estate agent and their own internal CRMs, right? How do all of those come together in an MCP architecture?
That is an amazing question, and I think Anmol, you laid it out really well. You were hearing the product owner hat while you were asking that question. Now let's wear a technical architect hat or a AI engineer hat on it, right? So now imagine three clients, A, B, and C. The first client is a conversational UI. Like you asked a question, right? How does this 2 BHK compare to other apartments nearby in Seattle downtown, right? That is a conversational AI piece. Then imagine another client, which is like a backend AI process that can compare listings, right? And we'll not talk in more detail about this client, but it's good to know that multiple clients build up a use case, right? That's to paint that picture. And think about another client, client C, which is like a recommendation engine, which suggests different or similar properties nearby, right? So these are the different clients. And then now, if you think about the different servers, so you have server A, B, and C again. The first MCP server can look at historical property listings and past sale prices. Now imagine this to be one agent. It can solve a particular piece of the problem, not the entirety. This agent has access to very local CRM data source of this real estate company. This CRM data is not publicly available on the internet. So this is very proprietary information that this agent can use to make unique inferences for you. The second MCP server, which is server B, is an agent that can get current listings, market trends, property features. Now, this is something which this real estate company may not have on its own. So what it'll do is it'll go to a public source like MLS. MLS is into the business of collecting all of this property data, market trends, etc. Now, this agent is specifically designed to talk to the MLS server using MLS APIs, right? So this is like a public endpoint. See on the top half of the screen, and then we have the tech flow, which is on the bottom half. So the user flow is number one, the customer asks the question, like Anmol asked the question just now, right? The second step is an agentic step. Now, looking at the question, the client or the agentic step would decide how to route this request to one or more agents. And it routes the request to one or more agents, it gets the answer, it aggregates the results, and then it gives a response to the customer, like what ChatGPT does for you. So that is kind of the user flow. Now, if you think about the tech flow, as soon as the user asks the question, that is where the client A comes into picture. It gathers this question and then it passes on to the orchestration layer, which is the second part, which is the host, which orchestrates that request and sends it to one or more agents. Now here, three agents come into picture, which is what in MCP terminology is called the MCP server. You have A, B, and C. The first agent, which is A, which is the lower part, it actually receives sales history from the internal records based on the request from Anmol. The server C, which is the second one, it pulls the recent valuations from Zillow. And the server B, it fetches the current listings from MLS. All of this data is atomic in nature. All of these fetches do not make sense unless they are aggregated together. And that is where the fourth agent, which is called as server D, comes into picture. What this agent does is it gets data from A, B, and C and it compares the amenities, it compares price per square feet, historical appreciation, etc., and generates a final recommendation. Now, you might ask, why is this an agent? Why this could not be like a if then else style business logic? That is where the comparison of amenities, price per square feet, you don't need to hard code this logic. You can create more like an agentic flow. Use an LLM underneath to say that if I have this type of a property, can you identify what should I compare to make a recommendation? The LLM will decide what should be compared and then it will take actions on it. And that is the key agentic angle over here. Once it makes all of this recommendation, it passes it on to the last step, which is again back to the client. The client takes the response, converts it into a easy to understand language, and shows it back to you and more.
Amazing, Karan. I feel like, first of all, that was going to be my question. Why not an if then else here, right? So I feel like with the LLM taking that sort of decisions, you do not need to write that layer yourself. It honestly feels like magic to me that all of this we are able to do as of now. I know we've covered all of the things related to this. One final question, Karan, which is not really related to this topic, is MCP came in December 2024, and there might be a Google's version of MCP. There might be like a Tesla version of MCP. So, how do we think about that? And when we're talking about large enterprises with like thousands and millions of dollars in budget and they are implementing this, how do the leaders actually think through that implementation?
That is a great question, Anmol, and I think I've been hearing that question a lot as part of my work as well. Think of this as a protocol, right? There will be many which will come over time. There'll be more advanced versions, better versions, different versions that will come, but doesn't mean that you cannot use this today. There is no world in which we can wait for a long period of time for a more mature protocol to come in and then start using it. So, what my recommendation would be, as you start building these AI use cases, or let me call them agentic use cases in your enterprise, I would recommend using MCP, setting up an AI ecosystem so that people at grassroots level have a standard that they can use. You don't want them to go rogue, develop their own custom things. This is a much better spot to be in. And then Google has come up with another protocol, which is A2A, that is for a slightly different purpose. That is for two agents to talk to each other. But we will cover that in the later episode as well. How A2A and MCP plugs in together. I think MCP is a very good start. Think of it like a USB standard. You start at USB A, tomorrow you'll get to USB C.
Amazing. So, just to reiterate that, I should think about it as like a complete protocol, which will be able to help you build everything in like the best way possible as of today. I think, Karan,
That,
that was super enlightening to me, and hopefully it was enlightening to our users as well. We'll be following this up with another conversation on A2A and MCP and how both of them play together. And I'll just reiterate, like, share, and subscribe, and we'll be back with more content soon.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.